This is Becoming a Household Name, and I'm your host, Jody J. Sperling. I'm going to pick up right where I left off last week, and apologies, I feel a teeny bit out of breath at the moment. Try to keep up on my daily push-ups, because that's something that I have committed myself to doing, is looking out for my health. So if you've been following the podcast for a while, I'm one of those crazy people who decided to do the carnivore diet. I'm probably more what they would call a ketovore. So I have quite a bit of dairy, cheese, sour cream cheese is my dessert. I love eating cream cheese at night. It satisfies the same itch that like ice cream or apple pie or something used to solve for me. And then a whole bunch of ground beef. I would say 90% of the meat that I eat at this point is ground beef, though tonight I'm going to have a steak, and I'm really looking forward to that. And that is something that I started doing when my weight got completely out of control. I had ballooned up from the time that the COVID pandemic hit until about last Christmas, so almost a year ago now, to 260 pounds. For reference, my comfortable weight walking around every day was 185, pretty much as long as I have been a full-grown, mostly adult. So saying like 16 years old on now to 39 years old, 185 pounds was where I felt comfortable. My body kind of maintained there. I had decent musculature that's mostly given to genetics, I think, because I've never been a super hard gym kind of guy, although I've went through phases where I've definitely tried to bulk up. What guy? Well, anyways, what guy wouldn't? I don't know. It's something in me that is driven to want to bulk up from time to time. But for the most part, I am not somebody who hits the gym all that often. Other things I've been doing is I took up sprinting. There is a doctor out there, I believe his name is Dr. Anthony Mara. He talked about the power of sprinting and getting rid of visceral fat, which is the most dangerous kind of fat in the world, and it drives all kinds of issues. Sprinting targets visceral fat. And so I have been sprinting almost daily now for about 4 months, and I have been eating carnivore since December, right before Christmas. Why did I start doing carnivore before Christmas? Because I was too excited to wait for a New Year's resolution. And those two things have gotten me to the point where 210 pounds on the scale, it took a long time to lose 50 pounds. But the upside for me is that I've been able to sustain doing this kind of thing. I did start lifting weights as well. I've been really focusing on my legs to get faster at sprinting. So everything is kind of driven around those core things, and it seems to keep me in a fairly good place, along with being a carnivore, because obviously alcohol is not something that you can have when you're a carnivore. I don't drink alcohol anymore, though I do use something called kratom, if you're familiar with it. That's a plant, and that totally breaks like all the benefits that I should get from carnivore. I'm actually aware of that. In fact, I've been wondering recently if I'm just going to have to fight myself and stop using the kratom, because I noticed some digestive issues that have popped up, as well as some of those sneaky old addictive tendencies have been kind of in the back of my head. Like I don't feel totally normal until I've had my daily kratom, and I don't love that. It is more manageable, and I'm not driven to use it throughout the day. I always have it once, and I enjoy kind of like the cool, chilled out feel that I get. Don't love the nausea that seems to come along with it. So anyways, those are the things I'm doing health-wise, but I wanted to pick up where I left off from last week, talking about the number one focus in my life right now, and that is organic social media. Guys, I'm really excited about how this last week went. I hope that I continue to see this kind of progress, because I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of work. Most days right now I'm spending more than 4 hours on Instagram. How am I breaking up that time, and are the results worth it? I can't tell you for sure yet if the results are worth it. I had a book sale on Amazon, which I'm not doing any kind of advertising whatsoever at all, but I had one single book sale on Amazon this past week. That is better than the 0 book sales I had the 3 previous weeks. But it's not enough to say like I know that what I was doing on Instagram is what drove that book sale. Some other things, though, that I have been doing, and I talked about this, so I'm not going to go into a lot of depth here. You can listen to last week's episode. But what I have been doing that has seemed to work is I am finding reels, just scrolling through the video reels on Instagram, where I think that I can take some text and apply it to it. So one that did somewhat well was a scene from Jim Carrey film where Bruce Almighty, there it is, where he opens a file cabinet and like all the prayer requests of the world come flying out of the file cabinet. And I captioned that with something about outlining the whole series. And somebody's like, I don't like to start reading series until the whole thing has been published. And I basically said, you're going to be waiting a long time. But I have it outlined. And so that one did fairly well. It sounds silly when I say it like this, but it seems like people enjoy kind of that quick hitting visual with the little text. And I've been doing a lot of different things like that. In fact, the very best one I had was one I almost didn't do, but there was a reel of a guy on a skateboard who's just like cruising down the road that is winding down a mountain. And I mean, when I saw it, I had a visceral reaction to it because I was like, if that guy falls, he's deader than dead. I just, wow, crazy. And so I said, caption is what people think a writer's life is like. And then I took just a tiny bit of film from me standing at my booth this week in St. Cloud, Minnesota. It was a moment where there was a real lull. I hadn't seen any customers in a while, so it's just me kind of looking around being like, where is everybody? And I said, what a writer's life is really like. And that one got just under 4,000 views at this point. It had a couple of shares. It had a heap of likes. I think it had a couple of comments. And that one did pretty well for me. So my average reel, like I talked about last week, is somewhere between 50 and 200 views. These reels have been doing a lot better for me. I'm bumping up towards seeing most of them get around 300 to 400 views. And then, like I said, one got up to just about 4,000. So that's progress in the right direction. If attention is the main currency by which we become a household name, then reels that get seen by 4,000 people is a lot better than 200. And so I'm happy with that. And I've seen some reels that have been popping a little bit more. The other piece that I've been focused on is I found a mystery writers themed Instagram account. And I looked at everybody that account was following. Not the people who were following it, but everybody that account was following, because I figured they'd probably done the hard work of vetting the kinds of people that are interested in their stuff, the people who are interacting with them, and the people that they've enjoyed interacting with, because it takes a whole lot more for us to follow someone than it does for someone to follow us. I know that sounds like it's the same thing, but it's actually really different. We choose more selectively who we're going to follow than necessarily someone else chooses how they're going to follow us. You'll always see that ratio skewed. So the bigger accounts have a lot more followers than they do follow people. And so that was my theory behind that. And what I do is I just go to each of those accounts that they are following, and I look at their most recent post. I find something that I can comment to them. I make a comment, I like their post, and then I move on to the next. And I just go down the list and do that for hours at a time right now, because I'm really focused on building Instagram. One thing that I'm going to do this week is I'm going to start mirroring that behavior on TikTok to the best of my ability. TikTok, I have not found, and I don't know if it's something about my app version or if I'm just technologically a moron, but I haven't found a way to do the remix feature that Instagram has. So when I was telling you about the Jim Carrey clip or the skateboarder, those are called remixes. You just click the little icon at the bottom, the three dots, and if the reel is able to be remixed, it'll be one of the top options in the center. You hit remix, you put your caption on, you write a little bit of a caption for the post itself, and then you post it. It's very easy, it's very quick. If you find the right ones, they seem to do well. I have not found that feature on TikTok, and so that has been something that I've allowed myself to not necessarily dive into, but I think it's important, because when something goes on TikTok, it seems to go a lot bigger than Instagram, and I think that's where their algorithm is at so far. So I've committed to myself that I'm going to be doing that on TikTok as well, and I'll report to you next week on how it's going. But so all of that activity, I get people who will comment back to me on Instagram when I comment on their reel or their post, and trying to build those relationships. I will follow a select number of them. So if I don't notice that they are identifying as a reader and actively interested in mysteries, I don't follow. I just comment and like and move on. But some of them I'll follow back in the hopes that you get the reciprocity. And this is where I think some encouraging growth has happened. And then I also want to share with you something I changed about how I'm doing my comic convention booths. This might be helpful to some of you as well. But first, I now have 617 followers. That's up somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30, if I'm counting correctly, from where I was at last week. So I'm not going to be winning any awards for the speed of my growth, but there is positive growth. And another thing to mention is the skateboarding remix reel that I did, that generated about 6 followers. So that was a fairly significant portion of the new followers that I gained. And it was something that motivated me to keep doing this, because when a reel will generate follows for you, you can grow quite quickly. And that's something I'm going to continue to focus on. Hopefully it will work over on TikTok as well. And then I generated some reciprocal follows by using the strategy on Instagram of commenting and liking and engaging with people. It wasn't perfect reciprocity. In fact, there's a guy who introduced me to Richard Chismar's Chasing the Boogeyman, which, if you haven't read Chismar before, Chasing the Boogeyman is a major 5-star read for me. It was so good. It was really, really frightening. And it felt a little bit like Truman Capote to me. It felt true, even though the book starts out telling you that this is a fiction, it's a made-up story, that there's some true details mixed in, but that it is a fiction. By the halfway to 3/4 mark, I just had somehow forgotten. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the craziest, coolest story. And then at the end of the book, when he again reiterates this was just a fiction, I don't know, I felt betrayed, but in the best possible way. It was a really great novel. The reason I mention that is because one of the guys that I commented on Instagram, he had said, that's the book you should read. We had a good back and forth, a couple of them, and I gave him a follow. He didn't follow me back. I'm hurt deep down in my soul. I'm just deep. No, I mean, I wish he would have followed back, and maybe he will eventually, because I'm going to continue to engage with him and eventually drive that relationship. And so those are the things that have worked well for me this week. Now I want to talk about something that I did at the show this week. So St. Cloud, Minnesota, QuadCon. All of the QuadCons, almost all of the QuadCons take place in a shopping mall. And I've done a number of them, from Columbia, Missouri, now up to St. Cloud, and Peoria, Illinois coming up, Des Moines, Omaha. They hit a lot of the middle of the country shopping malls in medium to larger size towns. Sioux Falls was another one I did, and that was a ticketed show, but same guy. So I was at QuadCon, and the first day I had really, really good sales. It was super exciting, but I didn't buy an actual table. You have an option when you do QuadCons to add a table for $20, and I have a small 4-foot table. It's really small, but I thought, you know what, I won't spend the $20. I'll just set up my little table. I don't even have enough titles that I have to have a 8 or 10-foot table. Usually I feel like I'm spread out more than I want to be. 4 feet turns out to be a little bit too small. I probably will continue to do it at QuadCons, because why not? But it is not the perfect size. It's also a little more of a squat table than I'm used to, so it's lower to the ground. But my setup was such that I had all of my titles facing both directions. I'm in a mall aisle, and traffic is coming from both directions. So there's no clear front or back of the booth. There aren't even really clear sides. People are coming from all different directions depending on where they entered the mall, where they're headed. And so I decided that I was going to have basically a circular or a wrapped around kind of a design where there was the same titles on both sides of the table, so that people could see, no matter where they were coming from, what I had to offer. And that meant that there was not room on the outside of the table to put my flyers out. Not only that, but I've been giving out flyers at every single show I've done since I started this. I had those flyers printed up immediately, and I hand them out with every book sale that I have. Or if somebody's just like, hey, can I take this? Of course you can. I don't have any evidence that a single book has been sold off of giving those out. They cost 8 cents a piece to print, which isn't expensive, but it's not nothing also. And if they're not selling books, then that means people are probably throwing them away. Could there be a longer tail on it? Maybe, but we're talking a little over a year now that I've been doing shows, and to not have any verified proof that they're selling anything, I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna not give them out. There's no room on the table. And so instead, I set out my little acrylic sign that just has a QR code for my Instagram. And it dawned on me that I could just tell people, if they're like, hey, do you have like a flyer or something or a bookmark so that I can find you? And I was like, I don't, which is a little white lie, but because I do. But I decided, you know what, scan this QR code. You can give me a follow on Instagram. You'll be able to find all of my books, my website, everything there on Instagram, and I generate a follow. Do I know it's a super high quality follower? I don't. Do I think that it might generate sales? Not really sure. But if more followers is visually more appealing to people who check my profile out, then I'm driving yet more traffic toward Instagram. And so I was really surprised how well that worked. I got a whole bunch of people to scan the QR code, give me a follow, and now at the very least, it's a real human being verified that's following me, so I don't have to worry about whether it's a bot or anything. I got something out of the interaction. And that worked, like I said, fairly well. Probably 15 of the 30 followers that I had came from that. So if you're talking 6 followers from one reel that popped a little bit, 15 followers from the con, and then the remaining 9 followers came from reciprocity. So it seems like all of that is working fairly well. If I get a reel that pops even more, that's probably where the real magic is going to take place. But I will be in Madison, Wisconsin this coming week. I'm going back there for Tattoo Fest, I believe it's called. And it's a show that moves all around the country. The booth was north of $500. So it was a big investment. And my theory, I've probably mentioned it on the podcast before, is that the kind of people who go to tattoo conventions are going to have a different relationship to money than people who go to the mall and are just walking through. And if I did fairly well at the mall, then I'm thinking I might be able to sell more book sets. It's not as big of an ask to say to somebody, you can get the first 4 books of the Luke and Time Mysteries for $60 when they know they're going to be spending several hundreds of dollars to get a tattoo at a tattoo convention. So that's my going theory. I will definitely report back to you on that next week. But my philosophy is that I'm going to see a lot more set sales, and that's the hope. If it goes well, I'm going to be booking more of the Tattoo Fest shows around the country. There's one in St. Louis coming up that I'd love to do after the turn of the new year, and I believe there's one in Denver. There's a couple other places, but I might double down on tattoos if this weekend goes well. So wish me luck. If you're listening to this and you like to wish people luck, then just wish it for me, big time. That is the update. Oh, and lastly, I will just tease something that is really exciting. I've got 2 upcoming guests that are going to be so fantastic. One of them is a guest that I really didn't think that I was going to have. And so she's a brilliant, thoughtful person who has built an amazing community through Substack. Her story's amazing. You're going to love hearing it. And I'm going to be digging into how to maybe use Substack more efficiently and effectively than I have been using it. Obviously, this podcast is hosted through Substack, and that in and of itself is worth gold because a lot of the other options cost a lot more money, and I honestly have not seen any benefit from using those options in the past. But there's the newsletter component as well. I send out my newsletter to anybody who buys my books. Not anybody, but anybody who downloads the audiobook. And that does remind me, I want to touch on that as well. They then will go on to my All Things Novel Substack, and they'll get the weekly release of the memoir that I'm working on right now, My Life in Cats. And that seems to do well. I don't drive a lot of interaction on there, and that's something that I'm hoping to talk to this upcoming guest about, is what are the kind of things that you do to drive more interaction? It always feels like there are so many pathways, social media-wise, and on the interwebs that you have to keep track of if you want to grow. But if I have this goal of becoming a household name, I've got to juggle all of it and do it really well. So I'm working on those things. I look forward to updating you about next week. And yes, last thing, the QR code at the front of my books. If you have an audiobook that you've produced yourself, I cannot recommend highly enough, pop a QR code at the front of your book that says, hey, I'd like to offer you this audiobook when you purchase the paperback. Just scan the QR code and download it, and you can listen as well as read with your eyes. And that has worked really well for me. There's no evidence that I have that people who buy the book electronically or online necessarily download it. And also, if they've bought from me in another, like my website or something, I already get their email address. So it's kind of doubling up. But people at the show who buy my books, oftentimes a handful of them go on to download the audiobook, and then I'm able to capture their information, get them on the email list, and hopefully keep them warm to the fact that Jody J. Sperling exists out there, and that he's writing books, and that he's an interesting guy with interesting insights into the world, etc., etc. And so that does work well. Strangely enough, I was checking before I jumped on here to see if I'd gotten any downloads from St. Cloud, and it appears that nobody has downloaded the audiobook yet. So the speed at which people read your books when they purchase them over the weekend can be a little slower than you've wanted. I said last thing, but this is the last thing. Reviews. If you are listening right now and you happen to know a good way to drive reviews, I still haven't figured that piece out. I would love to. I'm at 67 reviews for The 9 Lives of Marva DeLonghi. None of my other books are even close to that. And it's one area where I feel like I've really failed. I don't know how to drive reviews. I hate asking for reviews, and it's just kind of challenging and clunky. So I'm open to learning any strategies you might have, and I'll obviously update you with anything I learn. Until next time, this is Becoming a Household Name. Oh, why not just ask you to leave a rating and review on whatever podcast app you're listening to? It helps the show out a ton. And we are growing quite quickly, quite rapidly right now. It's very exciting. Hopefully that continues. But I thank you so much for checking the show out. I hope that it provides value to you. It is truly my goal. Like I'm so focused on trying to share the information that's working for me to help you out, because there's more than enough to go around. Becoming a household name won't happen overnight, but with your help, it can happen for me or for anyone you know who's on this journey. If you liked what you heard today, would you consider sharing this podcast with someone you know would love it too? Word of mouth is the single biggest difference maker for a dreamer's outcome. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.